Welcome, everyone, to Gooey's Dungeon Dive, the podcast where I, Gooey, rank all of the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda in chronological order, and we're at the season finale of Ocarina of Time, and of course, as always, I'm joined by my good pal, Corey Richmond. How's it going, Corey?
It's going good. Got my coffee,
Cool.
got my list in front of me, and ready to rank some Ganon's Castle.
Recording on a nice Sunday morning. Got lazy Sunday vibes, but we're not gonna be lazy. So okay, before we get into it, let's do all the housekeeping stuff so people have to hear it. Corey, how's the Player Power podcast going?
It's going good. We are well underway recording our second season. We actually just recorded one a few days ago, so that's the second episode of season 2 that should be coming up soon.
That'll probably be out by the time this comes out, right?
Yeah, probably.
What's it about?
We're ranking the Johto gym leaders this time. We're continuing that little series that we started last season.
Okay, ranking things is fun, isn't it?
Yeah, we love a good ranking over on the Player Power podcast.
I gotta be honest about like ranking and like assigning scores to things, because that's all I ever do. I find it fun to do. But I have to say, I don't think it's actually important, if that makes sense. To discussing things, like discussing games or art or stuff like that. I don't think like assigning grades to them is actually what's important. It's more about discussing how they make you feel.
Kind of takes away some of that aspect.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I've always found the concept of ranking things to be like fun. So
I agree. It's just nice to see them like in order and be like, I like this one more than this one, more than this one.
Yeah. And then I always have like this crisis. I'm having it with this. I've had it with like if I've tried to rank like movies and stuff like that, where I'm like, this isn't right, or like with the definitive ranking, I'm like, no, I don't know about this. But here we are ranking all of the dungeons in The Legend of Zelda. So who am I to say? I really enjoyed your controller ranking. That was fun.
Yeah, that was cool. That was a fun one. We're definitely going to be doing some more tier lists, some more rankings, some more regular discussions. I know you're going to be on for at least a couple episodes.
We're going to rank something, I think, from Zelda.
Yes, we will.
Perfect crossover. We're good at this, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's Player Power Podcast. It's on all the podcast things.
Yeah.
So you can find a podcast. It's not hard to do.
Just
anymore.
Look it up, people. You can find it.
So yeah, otherwise I kind of said all this stuff in my Gerudo training ground video, but I wanted to get this out of the way. I'm gonna take a slightly longer break, and I'm going to just make all the videos for Majora's Mask and then release them weekly. The reason is so I can kind of do it at my own pace, because I sort of gave myself a little bit more buffer with Ocarina of Time, but then when I was doing the videos here with like the gameplay, it took a little bit more work to get those together, and for a minute I was feeling kind of like under pressure, like, oh man, I gotta be working on this.
Mm-hmm.
And so for like a few videos I felt a little bit rushed, but then these last 3 I did all in the same week, like for fun, and it was really fun. So, but that being said, I want to kind of with Majora's Mask, I'm going to take my time, and because there's a lot of like side content and stuff like that, and I think that's going to be the like way going forward, is when they're done, I'm just going to release them, one a week, basically, kind of like a TV show or something like that. So, but yeah, that being said, we're pretty close to getting 300 subscribers on here. So I think we could do, maybe if we do that, we could do another, maybe we could rank the bosses of Zelda 2 or something like that.
Ooh.
Yeah, that might be kind of fun.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
So, get the word out, and we might do that. Might do it. We'll do it. Why not?
Yeah.
So I think that's everything. We're all ready to get into talking about, all right, the dungeons of Ocarina of Time. This was This is pretty fun to go through. After having the context of the previous 4 games, like this has actually been a great experience, I think, going through the series chronologically, and because we're doing it weekly, kind of like really gives you a minute to kind of think on not just the dungeons, but like the game overall. But what did you think about Ocarina of Time's dungeons this time through?
I feel like I say this every time like we get to a new game. At least for the past like 3 games I've said it, but I feel like we're really reaching what the pinnacle of a Legend of Zelda dungeon is, Because
Okay.
like at least we're getting stuff like the Water Temple and the Forest Temple, which are some of the most beloved dungeons in the series, at least amongst the fans. And I feel like Ocarina of Time, introducing dungeons in a 3D space, it can really change, your perspective of how the dungeon operates and how the navigation works, because you're not just going room to room to room. You can actually build, architectural structures and have to navigate them.
Yeah, totally. I would mostly agree with that, yeah.
Yeah, and then I feel like I don't know if you agree with this, I feel like just being a 3D dungeon, or just being a 3D game, they kind of have more at their disposal to drive home some of the, like, atmospheric details and, stuff like that. I feel like as the technology gets better, they will be able to do more impressive things on that front.
Yeah, I actually do agree with that. So I have, if you look at our lists, I kind of have Ocarina of Time kind of all over the place. And I think some of the weaker dungeons I have on it, I think I would like actually a lot less if they didn't do as good of a job kind of driving the aesthetic home, actually. Like, I think from like more of a design standpoint, I was kind of like mixed on it, but then seeing like being like, oh, I'm climbing up these volcanoes, or like oh, I'm inside Jabu Jabu, like that kind of sold the experience a little bit more. Mm-hmm. Whereas like if those were somehow translated to 2D, or like if they didn't have that, I don't think I would like them quite as much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I would agree with you that like we're kind of seeing the pinnacle. Like I've given Water Temple the number 1 spot, but at the same, I feel like there's like huge leaps forward in terms of like how you can present a dungeon in 3D. But then there's other stuff where I feel like it's just kind of either fallen off from the last game, or at least like maybe just kind of like not innovated enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
but that's kind of a sign of like, I mean, they're still ranking well, considering how much I praise some of these previous dungeons.
Definitely. And I think something that I think is funny, and I think this is something that's going to trend as we get into the 2000s era Zelda games. If you look at our lists, we actually ranked Ocarina of Time, like if you take Ocarina of Time out of the list, we actually ranked the dungeons somewhat similarly. But
okay, yeah, you're right.
But if you look at our list as a whole with the other games, yours definitely trends a little bit. Mine are kind of more bunched together towards the top. Yours are kind of more spread out going throughout the entire list. And I think that's because I'm a little bit more forgiving if it's not architecturally or navigationally super challenging. I'm more willing to forgive it if it does have that cool 3D atmospheric stuff. For me, I feel like that tends to outweigh navigational flaws, as opposed to if you find it navigationally boring, I feel like that tends to drag it down a little bit more for you.
I kind of had those thoughts playing this because I was like, there are times where, especially in like Spirit Temple and even Ganon's Castle, where I was like, I don't know if I would say this is like the most challenging dungeon necessarily, but it does make for kind of like a fun adventure.
Yeah.
And so it's maybe a little bit more like casual, but if you're kind of looking to just like run around and like explore like a cool environment, like it really does that really well.
Yeah.
But I kind of like something that straddles the line a little bit more.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they do that Yeah, I think they do that a little bit better in some of the 2D ones, but
That's fair.
yeah. But yeah, overall, I mean, Ocarina of Time is one of my favorite games of all time, and I was trying to be fair with it, and especially considering the context. Not to say you weren't, but I was trying to like really weigh it against some of these dungeons and like not be like totally biased against this game I
Hmm.
love. And I don't know about you, but I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. Like
Yeah.
even though we're kind of spread out more, I think in general the idea of our lists is like Ocarina of Time like mixed right in there, you know.
Yeah.
Like I can't look at yours and say like that you were totally biased towards that idea of like a 3D game or anything like that, because
No,
you
no.
have a mixed it right in the mix too.
Yeah. And I tried to, a lot of times going back to just ranking things in general, a lot of times I like to take an objective approach, and that is, I feel like that's a futile thing
Yeah,
to
yeah,
attempt
definitely.
here, because these are our lists, and that's what I keep reminding myself when I'm doing these. It's like, as much as I feel like I can point to a dungeon and say, I think this is actually better than that other dungeon. What really matters is I'm looking at it and thinking, where is this one of my favorite dungeons? How do I
Yeah.
personally feel about this dungeon?
I think someone had commented in the Discord or something and said like they're referring to like these like complexity in design, whatever that actually means.
Yeah.
But they're like, I don't really rank it thinking about that. I just rank it based on like what I think is the most fun.
Which,
um
yeah, that's totally valid.
yeah, and I'm like, yeah, that's legit. And so like what I will throw this in though, like what is kind of most fun to me is that like I like a dungeon where even if I've played it a million times and I know it pretty well, like Eagle's Tower I know pretty well, or something like that. I like a dungeon that can still kind of I like make me think upon replay. And so all
Yeah.
of these have been replays. So um that's where I'm at. I'm not necessarily just like if I was doing that and like just looking at a map and going like, "Oh my god, this is so complex." Like I don't know, like Ice Palace from A Link to the Past would be, higher or something like that,
Yeah.
because that's a pretty complex dungeon, but it's not as fun to play. So it has a little mix of both, like you were saying. There's some kind of like looking at the structure, but also
Hmm.
like weighing it against like, well, how much fun is it?
And I feel like that's really, especially for the 2D games that we've done, the past few games, it's like, for with that, after I play through the dungeon, I'll look at the map and really reconsider what the navigational challenge was or what the puzzle was. And a lot of times that kind of makes me see the dungeon in a different light. Whereas I feel like with Ocarina of Time, with a couple dungeons aside, generally they're not crazy complex, at least
Mhm.
navigationally. So for me, I feel like that's not, first of all, that's harder to do with a 3D dungeon, to just look at the layout afterwards and, piece together bit by bit how someone would navigate through that dungeon. But
Mhm.
also, there are, because it's a 3D dungeon, because it's going to be more cinematic, because they're going to have some more atmospheric stuff, there's just more to consider.
Totally, yeah. So I'll say with Ocarina of Time, I think it starts sort of a trend. Though I don't think Majora's Mask does this as much, and I don't think Wind Waker really does this as much. But like with some of these dungeons where they're not complex, I feel like they at least had some kind of big memorable puzzle. But I kind of harped on it a lot, where I feel like I like felt like they kind of give too many hints about them. Like Dodongo's Cavern to me is like the big one, where it's like that would be like similar. The bombing the eyes of the skull to me is similar to some of those like really novel stone beak puzzles or whatever in Link's Awakening, where it's not like the craziest puzzle you've ever done, but it's like neat and novel. But it's like the hint for it is right next to it. It's a little obscure, but I feel like if stuff like that wasn't in some of those dungeons, like they would shoot up my list just because they'd be like fun experiences that are very thematic, and then they have like one kind of big memorable moment that like could be a minor brain teaser, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Sure.
So that's kind of where I'm mixed on it too, is where I feel like they could have done a little bit better with that. Though, like I said, I think that's the start of a trend, like sort of by introducing kind of this companion that comes with you. But I don't think Tattle does that too much, and you don't really have like a companion flying around with you in Wind Waker, and that one actually does have a lot of like nifty puzzles. So like I feel like we'll be good for a minute, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I can't really think of anything in those games or games coming up where it's egregious like that. And there definitely are some moments like that in this game. I feel like I'm a little bit softer on those than you. But it depends. It depends, because like there's one in the Shadow Temple. It's that wind puzzle where you're in a corridor, and it's, there's fans that are blowing you, and you're on like a walkway, and there's an invisible wall over to one side, so you need the fan to push you while you're wearing the hover boots so that you can get over there. But like the next room is literally just like a signpost that tells you like, let the wind carry you. And it's like, oh,
at least it's in a different
so that's
room.
what I have to do. I don't know. That feels even more egregious to me than the Dodongo's Cavern one. Because that's at least for me, that's just a puzzle. That's just one puzzle in that dungeon. Whereas we're talking about the big central cinematic puzzle in Dodongo's Cavern. I still feel like even if that tablet is a little too much to tell you like, hey, you have to do this right here, right now. When you do that, when you drop those bombs in, the eyes turn red and the mouth just opens up. I'm just like, that's rad.
Oh, so you're just impressed by the bright lights and pretty colors going off.
I feel like that is what makes me forgive those hints.
Okay.
Because the Shadow Temple one, that doesn't have any of those flashy lights or whatever. So when I do the puzzle, I'm like, wow, cool. Thanks for telling me that hint. You didn't have to tell me that.
Yeah, I could see that. I feel similarly though. Yeah, I feel like they definitely could have done that Shadow Temple one a lot better too. Like especially, yeah, because it is kind of, that one's set up to be like a really clever puzzle. I feel like where you're trudging along and you're trying not to get blown off the edge, and you've figured out, oh, I need to use the iron boots, and then now if you like look at your map or whatever, use the lens of truth, now you kind of have to do the opposite of what you've sort of trained yourself to do and kind of let yourself get blown off the edge. Like, that's pretty cool, but
it is cool.
Yeah, whatever.
I also feel like you played the Ocarina of Time 3D version, right?
Yeah.
And I did as well. And I think that might be something that's interesting to compare side by side, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they give Navi more dialogue in the 3D version. Like I think they have
Okay.
I think they have her pop in and give you like little small hints a little bit more often in the 3D version.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't know. I guess I didn't really remember that.
I don't really have specific examples. I'm pretty sure they do give her a couple lines of dialogue here and there where she didn't have some in the original version. I would just be interested to see if that factors into like giving you hints in dungeons, how often she does that,
That's true. Oh, well, I wasn't about to go play both versions.
Yeah,
but
that's too much work.
As it stands, I guess ours are Ocarina of Time. We didn't do that with Link's Awakening too. There's difference with the dungeons, but
yeah,
just kind of kept it as one to kind of, not make things too confusing. So we're at the finale though, which is Ganon's castle, right? Ganon's castle, not
yes.
Ganon's tower. I always get the castle and towers confused.
Me too.
And so with that, I mean, this is kind of the ultimate of what I was just talking about, where it's in itself is not like the most mind-bending dungeon, but it is kind of a roller coaster ride thematically. And so I think with any dungeon, I think this is like a good one for me to maybe be more cinematic than it is like a final test. Though I know how you feel about like the Ganon's Tower or Link to the Past, where it is like the ultimate gameplay test, and I actually think that is a lot cooler. But I can sort of forgive it here with this game, because, like I said, if any of the dungeons in the game need to be just kind of a cool like set piece, this is the one that I can let it be.
In the past, specifically with A Link to the Past, because you're right, I do have Ganon's Tower at my number 1. We've talked about this potential bias that I may or may not have called final dungeon bias, but I actually feel like that goes both ways, in that if a final dungeon is really good, I'm more prone to like it more because it's the final dungeon, whereas if because it's a final dungeon, I feel like it has this mantle that it needs to carry. It's almost a burden that like you're in this spot, you got to live up to the position that you've been put in. You really got to deliver and drive home the end of this game. Which is why I feel like I could be, it depends, but I could also be harder on a final dungeon because of that, if it doesn't meet those standards.
That's fair. Yeah, so I feel like this one, though, it really goes for like story-based elements, or like I think of the lead up to it before, where you meet up with Zelda, and she gets kind of captured, and then you go and like there's that cutscene where the sages make the bridge.
Yeah, that is very cool.
Ocarina of Time, actually, I'm going to take a step back. I feel like it is kind of, it has incorporated all these elements from A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, and been like, how do we translate that into 3D? And I think it sort of took the overall like game and story structure from A Link to the Past and maybe some of the more like refined dungeon elements and kind of made this game into the 3D. And I think the biggest thing they brought to it is one, how do we have the big structures and stuff like that in 3D? But two, imbuing a lot of these things with more story elements. So all the dungeons we had so far, like you have more of a like personal connection with characters and storylines going throughout it. And I think they like reverse engineer that back into A Link Between Worlds, where instead of having just like sages, you have characters, that you kind of some get to know. And I think this dungeon sort of shows that, because you see all these characters that you've sort of bonded with throughout the game, and they come similar to the Ganon's Tower scene in A Link to the Past. They kind of give you their power for this big thing, but I think it's a little bit more epic because you've got this big 3D cutscene, but also because all the people and stuff like that. Yeah,
that is definitely something. The narrative of Ocarina of Time is really, I think that's pretty powerful. That's definitely a strong suit of the game. And this, just the forming of the bridge with those characters that you know and love is great, but also just from a final dungeon standpoint, I feel like this and A Link to the Past share this aspect, which actually I think Ocarina of Time might even have it a little more, which is that, you can see this final dungeon for most of the game. You can come and stand in front of it and be like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there at some point. And it's just like teasing you. And then finally you're here, you build that bridge, and you're like, all right, I'm walking in. I can do this. And that's something that it happens in A Link to the Past with Ganon's Tower, because you can just see it. When you're on the pyramid, you can see it in the background. But also whenever you're up on Death Mountain, you can pass by it multiple times throughout your playthrough and just be like, this behemoth looks very imposing, and I'm gonna get in there at some point.
It really is a big moment in this game. Like, this shares kind of the two world thing, which I think similar to other things we've talked about. I think like A Link to the Past has more fun gameplay with like the dark world, light world, and switching between and like doing puzzles to get between. Whereas this has it has a bit more of a story impact because you go to the future and it's like literally the same world that you've been exploring, but now it's like in ruin and every place is like under attack from Ganondorf.
Yeah.
And that's a really big moment when you come out into the market and you can go right to the castle and they give you like a cutscene where Link is like horrified by the tower. And I think that's pretty cool.
This place that you were sneaking into just not too long ago to go visit Zelda has been completely obliterated and is replaced with this big, hideous black castle. You know? Yeah.
So, but I like that. I like how much of the DNA of the previous games is, especially the last two, is here. And so much of it, I mean, even in the other dungeons we've covered, like, there's so many, like macro details. Like, I think the overall structure of the game, like, reminds me of A Link to the Past with a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like, it's a little bit more straightforward. But then even, like, there's all these, like, minute details that I feel like are, like, they took that from that game and were like, how do we make this into 3D? And sometimes that's, like, there's things that are done way better in 3D. And then there's some things that I was like, well, I think this is just in here because it was in previous games, but I don't think it translated so well to 3D.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's, you know, here, this last dungeon is a great example of it because it is in so many ways in terms of like its segments, kind of like Ganon's Tower in A Link to the Past, where you have this bottom portion where you explore around in, which is significantly different, but then the second half of like climbing the tower.
Yeah.
But this bottom portion is very different because it's more of a each section is kind of meant to remind you of the different elemental dungeons that you've explored, which is a cool concept. I'll give it that.
Yeah. So that's really the big gimmick sort of this bottom half here is that each room is supposed to be themed based on the medallion or based on, you know, that dungeon that you've seen in the past, and it might borrow puzzles from that, and that is kind of an evolution of sorts of that practice that we talked about in A Link to the Past, which is that it brings back some challenges from, you know, the dungeons that you've played throughout the game. And I think that was something that I was very impressed with Ganon's Tower in A Link to the Past, because it managed to seamlessly weave that stuff into your experience, even to the point of, like, including those first 3 dungeons from the Light World, but remixing them and giving it a little bit more challenge, just with a little twist, and also doing stuff to, you know, require you to use a bunch of different items that you're not really thinking about because it's just a grand test. And I feel like this is something that we are also going to see return in other games throughout the series. And I feel like doing it the way that Ocarina of Time did it can be done well, but I feel like it's a little bit on the nose for me personally.
I figured you were going to go with that. And I see what you mean. Like in Ganon's Tower, you had like, you could have a room where it's like, there's ice on the floor all of a sudden, but like you've got to do, it's not all like ice palace themed things. Whereas this is like, you're in the fire room and it's like a big lava puzzle. Though I do think in some of the rooms they do a good job of like mixing it up. Like there's surprising things, like, you know, in the forest section, it's like a fan puzzle, you know, like there's a little bit of mixing it up. It's not totally straightforward, but it's still a mixed bag at that for me. Cause sometimes the puzzles are really, really clever and like, oh, that's neat. And then sometimes the puzzle is, I mean, this dungeon, I think, has some of the worst puzzles I've ever seen in Zelda, I gotta be honest.
Well, that's the thing, is that, like, conceptually, that could be fantastic. Because I would say each of the dungeons that it's trying to replicate do have some awesome puzzles, do have some really unique puzzles that are unique to only that dungeon, that you probably could have borrowed from and maybe fleshed out a little bit more. But instead, you have, it's something like 3 or 4 of those sections that you have to go to. The puzzle is collect the 5 silver rupees. And it's like, do we really need to be doing that in the final dungeon that much?
it sort of makes, sometimes I feel like, and it reflects on my list a little bit, where I feel like Ocarina of Time is sort of maybe uneven, I think. That's just my opinion, whereas like I feel like the two previous games had they felt a little bit more complete, and like they had a bit more progression. And I think this dungeon kind of shows that off, especially in that like light medallion section where it's like, I don't know,
Yeah.
it really feels like there maybe like, was that supposed to be, I don't know, was that supposed to be a dungeon in this game? I heard that there was supposed to be
there's like developmental there are hints and stuff that point towards, I think, Ice Cavern, supposing like that was supposed to be part of a dungeon or something.
Okay.
There's supposed to be like an ice dungeon, and then there was supposed to be a light themed dungeon or something. A wind dungeon,
like,
I don't know.
It feels like for what it's going for, like at times it could be maybe a little underbaked. I mean, it's still like maybe the greatest game of all time, but like, it just feels like, it's like missing some of that extra stuff. That was probably easier to do in like A Link to the Past, like to have all these types of dungeons, but like, it feels like it's missing some things. And it to me, it really shows in that light section, because like one of the puzzles is just like, I don't know, play the song, Zelda's Lullaby.
Yeah. There's
and then they give you a key. It was like, why doesn't that just open the door? Like, why do I have to get the key?
Well, one of them, it's the first room of either the light section or the spirit section. You walk in, and the puzzle is just get the 5 silver rupees. And all it is there are like 5 blade traps that are just going back and forth. And it's like, it wants you to push. Oh, no. It wants you to push the statues to like give you more space, but you don't even have to do that. You can just go.
I just run through them.
Yeah, you can just go run through and grab them, and it's not even a puzzle. It's just get these. Even 5
the one
things.
That's like really close.
Yeah,
you can just take the damage.
It's
fine.
Yeah.
So there's some that are not as good, but there's some that are pretty thought out, like where you do have to use different items you wouldn't normally consider. So it's kind of a mixed bag, but I do like the theming and like, you know, getting all the sages and stuff like that. I like the one that like trips you out, where it's like, oh, you have to like use the lens of truth to go one room further. That's kind of clever.
Yeah, that is clever.
You know, one thing that it does that I think hints at like maybe a more interesting idea is that for certain parts of it, you need the gauntlets, like the gold gauntlets, to progress. But like, it's like, one, it's just to enter that section, so it feels just kind of like, okay, why is this here?
Yeah.
And then another, it's just to do like one single puzzle, or like one part of it
in the fire.
I feel like
room.
Yeah, I could sort of see maybe an idea where you have the different sections, but you like similar to a normal Zelda dungeon, like you need to like get stuff from the different areas, maybe keys or different item upgrades that you have to take back to the other section, and maybe do like a little backtracking or something like that. That could have maybe made it a little bit more interesting, where now it's like there are these separate sections, but they're kind of weaved together or something like that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that could have been interesting. It's just I'd be interested to see. I don't know if there's anything out there that the development of this game, like the order in which they designed these dungeons, because it feels like that. You know, you compare it to something like Water Temple, where everything feels very intentional. It feels very thought out, and then you compare it to something like this, where it's just kind of like, okay, let's do the spirit section. What could be in this room? We'll put some blade traps and silver rupees. All right, what's going to be in the next room?
Right. I did like the bomb chew puzzle. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
I'm always happy to see a bomb chew puzzle. There's very few.
Yeah, bomb chew's underutilized in this game.
Yeah, I feel like they didn't fully figure it out what it could be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, this section kind of a mixed bag, but thematically kind of cool. Like the breaking the barrier is fun. But I think the second section holds up pretty well, because it's similar to these previous tower dungeons, where you just kind of are meant to feel like the growing tension as you climb, and because now we have this like fully 3D with like the music and everything, it feels pretty epic still as you're climbing and just kind of having these like, combat encounters. I don't know. Did you get that in the second part, or did you not like it as much?
No, I definitely. That's really the saving grace of this dungeon for me. That's really what makes it, is that, because that's the only really unique part about this dungeon. I feel like because it borrows so much from other dungeons in the bottom floor, I feel like this is really when Ganon's tower or Ganon's castle starts for me.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like a nice. It's an interesting gauntlet, and it makes sense contextually. You're climbing the tower. You got to get there. You got Ganon's theme playing on the organ in the background, and
it's getting like more parts to it are added. I think as you climb up, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's cool.
It's a bit more simplistic than like the tower section of Ganon's Tower, where you still have some puzzles and some bigger boss fights and stuff like that. But it's pretty cool, like just kind of like, oh, there's 2 Dark Nuts, or Iron Knuckles, I mean. Fights like that. It's pretty cool. I think the setting does a lot for it. It's not like the combat in Ocarina of Time is like the most amazing, but for its time, it was pretty.
It's fun. It's
pretty
so fun.
Intense to be in these sword fights and stuff like that. And I think maybe that's it. Maybe it's even better that it is just these like cool sword fights as you're climbing the tower.
Yeah, these enemies, like a lot of times when you see them before, they'll be treated as mini bosses. So these enemies that you're facing, like the Dark Nuts and the Stalfos Knights, you've fought them as mini bosses before, and now it's like fight multiple of them one after another, and it does give that cool sense of like development in the game, because now you're facing them and they're still making a spectacle out of it, but you're able to dispatch multiple right in a row just because you've grown as a player and Link has grown, as a character.
Yeah, and I do think, like I think I said it in Spirit Temple, but I've gotten pretty good. I like intentionally took hits in that video, actually, just to show how they hit hard, the Iron Knuckles. But like I've gotten pretty good at like you just kind of slash backflip. But at the time when I didn't fully know what was going on, back when I played it, like each single Dark Nut Iron Knuckle fight felt like a terror. And so like the fact that there was 2 of them, like for the longest time I would like purposely try to just wake one of them up at a time and like lure them away because I was so afraid to face 2 of them.
Yeah.
Whereas like now I'm like, whatever.
Just wake them up. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's fine. You have so many hearts and fairies and stuff like that. But yeah, it's a pretty epic section of the dungeon for sure. And of course, okay, so also drawing, I think, from Ganon's Tower, when the final fight at the top of the tower is it's a more cinematic version of the Aghanim fight from A Link to the Past. But I mean, it's sweet. I love this scene. You come in and I realize how ridiculous it is that Ganondorf is up there playing the organ.
I love that. That's such a neat
it's
little
so
touch.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. That's a great scene too, where he's got all that, and then I don't really think this makes the fight scarier for me now, but like the fact that Navi is like, I can't help you, is like, I guess at the time that's supposed to be like, oh no, I've grown so dependent on her,
Well, like even playing through it, I was like, isn't she? I don't know. Is she just like not there? Because like, what does that mean? Because you can still target him. I
don't think you can, right?
You can't target him? I thought you could.
No, I don't think you can target him.
Oh. Huh.
Yeah. It's like, I think that's what it is. You can like use the targeting to change the camera view, but you can't like directly target him. But you don't really need to. You just need to like face him and
shows
swing your sword.
Shows how much I needed to target him. I didn't even realize you couldn't. This
is another one where I'm sort of like, with this fight, I'm not trying to just keep comparing it to the previous games, but like I feel like in A Link to the Past and that section in Link's Awakening where you fight the Shadow Aghanim, like that fight was a bit more tricky because you had to like move around the room, and there'd be like multiple and stuff like that, whereas this is me speaking more now, where I just kind of stand in one place and wait for him. But then it has I think the plus side where it feels so much more epic,
super
because
cinematic.
The setting, and
even in this game you fight Phantom Ganon, same mechanic pretty much. You gotta hit the thing back at him. You gotta play the tennis.
Yeah, which they did that you had the 2 Aghanim fights in A Link to the Past, so I guess they've kind of prepared you for it. This has like the part where he shoots like the big magic ball at you. That was kind of a cool addition.
And he does the one where you have to do a spin attack, right?
Yeah, you can do I think that's what you had to do, a spin attack. I used to never be able to really do that, but I think with the full upgrade of the spin attack, it's really easy to reflect back at him.
And then there's the I can't remember who brought it up, but there's a moment after you reflect the magic back at him, it's after you hit him with an arrow. You shoot him with the light arrow. Yeah. When you're jumping over to that central platform to start slashing him and stuff, like the frame rate drops or something, but it makes it feel like it's in slow motion.
Yeah, as soon as you hit him, I think there's just so much going on that the game cannot handle it, and it just totally drops frames.
That's funny though that actually, even playing it this time, I was like it's timed pretty well. It does feel like you're jumping over the gap in slow motion, getting ready to go hit him.
It's so weird to think about, because it's literally anytime you get a frame rate drop, it feels awful in games, but it's so satisfying. It feels really good. It does. It just feels like I hit him so hard that the game is overwhelmed.
The game's like, dang, Goo.
And it's perfectly timed as right. If it was while he was throwing the ball or something like that, that would just mess it up. But it's a part where if you are timing it right, especially, you're mid-air. So yeah, it's sick. This is a good fight. I do like this fight. The tennis is always very simple, but it's just one of those things that there's certain Zelda staples that I'm always just happy to see, no matter how silly to some they might seem. I always love block pushing and lighting torches and stuff, and playing tennis against Ganon is always a good time.
Yeah.
Now, okay, so it's got maybe maybe the biggest contribution to it, I think, is the second section. The defeating Ganon, and the scene where he uses all his power to bring the tower down, and then you have sort of this escape with Zelda. I think is a cool moment, even though it's not the most challenging. I think I failed it actually back in the day more than a few times, but I think it is a cool cinematic moment. It's a great way to kind of end the game. It's just booking it out of this tower. Did you like it? As much as I did?
It's definitely a fun set piece. I think it's really cool to this tower that you just struggled through to ascend and get all the way to the top. Now it's crumbling, and you get to watch it crumble. I think the escape sequence is gameplay wise, it's nothing crazy. I think it's really just there for the cinematic nature of it, but it is cool.
You have combat sections that kind of hold you up, which again, I think that gave me more trouble before. And the combat's not as thrilling now as it used to be, but I think it's still cool moment to moment.
Yeah, it's nice getting to run down with Zelda, and Zelda's opening the gates and stuff. So what I think is really cheeky is that right at the end they throw a re-dead there to scream and stop you, and it's I'm almost at the end, just let me go.
If you're close, I've had that happen where you're really close to it running out, back in the day, that would really stress me out.
Yeah.
Whereas this time around I had extra time, so I just fought it.
Yeah.
Because I was all right, nice. Kill one last thing before Ganon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked what this game did for. I mean, I guess the escape it reminds me a little bit of Link to the Past where you escape. But this, I liked adding, and we'll see this in Wind Waker, I like the idea of adding Zelda in to the final section and like giving her some like her magic, use, other than just like her telepathy in A Link to the Past. Like that was cool.
It's nice seeing her
especially
actually
when
do
she
stuff.
Yeah, especially in the final fight here. The part where you're escaping, it's like weird, like she's using her magical like door opening ability, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's cool, I guess. But I liked having her overall in this game be kind of like active. I don't know how you felt about like I like Sheik, the idea of the Sheik character.
Oh yeah.
Was really cool. That was actually kind of, as you were like emailing me the thumbnails and like including the Sheik quotes, and I was sort of thinking like Sheik is the Link's Awakening owl of this game.
Yeah, actually though, for real.
That is like, on its face, a lot of the narrative elements of this game are like kind of simplistic. It's sort of like you want to be a real man, and like, it's just like making these connections that grow into adulthood. But then you have kind of like Sheik kind of like coming in and like putting like a poetic spin on like all these different stories. So I like that.
I feel like Sheik is the one that really, especially with those quotes, is the one that's like setting up the narrative stakes for the dungeons that you're entering. Like when you get to the Forest Temple, she talks about how like the flow of time is cruel, something that doesn't fade is a memory of younger days or friendship or something. And it's just really
exactly.
cool because that gets you thinking about Saria,
Yeah. I think people tend to kind of look back on the game now and they're like, oh, it's kind of simplistic from a storytelling perspective, but to me this carries over from A Link to the Past and especially Link's Awakening, where I think the simplicity of it actually is good. it like doesn't really get in the way too much, and then there's just some like light touches of like poetry almost on top of the game.
Yeah,
it's subtle, it's good, but nice cinematics though that kind of enhance it. Anyway though, the scene where the tower comes down is pretty awesome. Even in its like it's kind of primitive rendering of like 3D graphics.
It's sort still of just cool. Like, definitely for the time, still really cool.
Yeah, I love watching the polygons kind of fold in on themselves or whatever's happening. It's just getting smushed, but it looks pretty sick. And then you sort of the fight here we have with Ganon. It's sort of this is meant to be like similar to like Ganondorf being like a ultra charged version of Aghanim. Now we have like an ultra charged version of Ganon.
Yeah, he's letting out the true force of the Triforce of Power.
Yeah, pretty nice story here with the Triforce. Pretty simple.
Before he comes back out, something I want to point out is there's one shot that I think is so genius. I love it so much. It's like when afterwards they're standing right outside of the rubble and they hear something, and then the camera does like a really fast zoom way back towards where the noise came from, but it's still facing Link and Zelda, as if like
that's pretty good.
As if like to the perspective of like Ganondorf under the rubble or something, and it's like that's really cool. And then you're like, you got to go check it out. Like, oh, something's over there.
There are a few cutscenes where, for the time, and I think there were probably games at the time who maybe push this further, but like we do see the push towards like some cinematic shots.
Yeah, it's actually good, like really good direction, really good shots. Yeah,
and that's for sure a standout one. But I guess I like this fight with Ganon is pretty epic. I mean, I'm just gonna kind of keep saying the same thing. I think for me it's a little bit less fun of a fight. Like I still think the Ganon fight in A Link to the Past is like a gold standard battle for me. But this one it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I think, going in hindsight, now that we're talking about just how it was fun to have Zelda in that chase sequence, it's kind of unfortunate that for most of this fight, she just kind of stands outside of the Ring of Fire and just makes just cries when you get hit. But
Yeah,
it would have been cool to include her. But I definitely feel like this is, the fight. I don't find it boring, especially because I think there are a bunch of different ways to actually do damage to him.
Cool.
Like you can Deku Nut him, you can shoot him in the face with an arrow and then go shoot his butt with an arrow. You can just roll through his legs and slice at his tail and stuff. That's pretty neat.
Yeah.
The big thing I think for this is it's so iconic and cinematic, and especially, and this rang true very much for me on this recent playthrough. He is a lot less imposing in the 3DS version because the colors are much more bright and saturated.
Okay.
And in the N64 version, he's just this massive behemoth, and you can
Dark
basically
figure.
you can basically only see his silhouette unless the lightning flashes, and it's like, what is this grotesque thing I'm fighting?
I did like in this, I could tell that he was like kind of blue.
They gave him a little bit of blue back. That's good.
I've always not always actually. I grew up with like kind of this as Ganon to me, but I've come to really love the classic style of like Ganon.
Yeah,
as like this.
We stand Blue Pig Ganon on this podcast.
Yeah, and I think this one's pretty good and scary, but I've kind of hated. Maybe hated is too strong, but I haven't liked the transformation of Ganon into like Dark Beast Ganon, where it's like he's like a black warthog.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that.
That's fair. Okay. What's funny enough is that a lot of people say like they think of this as Ganon, but in reality, this is like probably one of the more unique Ganons in the series, because Dark Beast Ganon, the warthog type thing, like that's something that pops up in multiple Zelda games, and Blue Pig Ganon's in multiple Zelda games. There really aren't a ton of Zelda games where Ganon looks like this, where he's bipedal, but
true.
like has aspects
He's
of just
like
a giant monster.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe there's something to that, because I guess that's kind of cool. Like, it's like the first. I guess it's like the first canonical Ganon, wouldn't you say? If you're thinking about the timeline.
Yeah. Timeline wise, it is.
I like, because I've kind of grown to think like that A Link to the Past Ganon is so cool, because he's like literally more of a sentient pig, and he talks to you, and he has like clever quips and dialogues. Like he goes like on guard.
Yeah.
And just like, some of that over the top, like more video gamey dialogue, whereas this, like, he's a literal monster. But I like thinking about the lore implications of that, where it's like maybe over time he's like he because that's all he ever is in those games. So like maybe he's like grown into that form and become more human in that form, whereas like the Dark Beast form is more monstrous, and then in like Calamity Ganon is like pure, beast, pure monster,
evil beast.
I'm here for different presentations, but for some reason Dark Beast is maybe the least favorite. You know what it is? Well, maybe I'll save it for Twilight Princess, but I don't
mind Dark Beast, but I do. It's definitely there. I think there is something to be said about the uniqueness of this one and the sentience of Blue Pig Ganon.
It really feels like, it's like a big, like his big final moment of him harnessing that Triforce of Power and what it does to him. Yeah. Whereas like in Twilight Princess, it's like he turns into the warthog and then he turns back.
Yeah, that's a little weird.
Okay. Yeah, we don't need to talk about Twilight Princess too much, though. I like what you said about there's different ways to take him down. Actually, not knowing what to do as a kid made this very scary, very difficult. Because there are so many things that can be effective, it is a kind of a trick to like figure out like how do I beat him. But now I play him and I roll through his legs and slash him, and
exactly.
But as you can get totally crushed by him for sure. His hits pack a lot of punch.
Yeah, they do.
It does a lot of damage. But I think it's pretty solid. Similar to what I was saying, I kind of like a boss that every time I play it, it still gives me a bit of a challenge. So that's maybe why I like A Link to the Past more. Is like I know how to beat him, but like it's still like it's still a tricky fight, you know?
Yep. Yeah, that's fair. I would definitely agree with that in general. This is a little bit more style over substance, which I think is something that, you know, it's a trend that it's definitely present in Ocarina of Time. We're definitely gonna see it in future games. But I do think they really nail the cinematic aspect of it. And even just down to that his title card, you know, all the other bosses in the game have like a little subtitle descriptor, and this is something that everyone loves to point out, but it is incredibly effective. That for Ganon, it's not like evil Prince of Darkness Ganon, it's just Ganon.
Just Ganon, yeah. Yeah, it's sick. It's pretty sick. And the ending of it, where, like, again, we get to see Zelda use her power, and, like, that's what's cool is when she's, like, shooting off that big, like, beam and holding him, and then you just get to, like, execute
you just freaking stab him in the head.
Yeah, that's a pretty awesome ending. It's pretty iconic.
And that's another one where it's got some really cool shots, because it's got Link hacking and slashing, and it's changing the camera angle, and then he gets the final drive into the skull.
Yeah, and I love Ganon floating in the void. Curse you. Yeah. Always fun. Yeah, I mean, that's the end of the dungeon, but the end of the game, we might as well cover. Like, I like that where you're, like, floating in, like, space with Zelda.
Yeah, and she's basically like, sorry for all the problems that I caused.
Well, that's kind of a thing. I've liked her active presence throughout the game, because she's been hitting home these themes of, like, and all these characters and all these things talking about you, about, like, you want to be a real man, you know, and it's all these people are talking about, like, growing up and being a man and you know, being mature and stuff like that. But then Zelda is, like, flipping it and being like, well, you've been, like, kind of robbed of your childhood, essentially. And it's because because I thought that we could do this, which is kind of weird, but it was about, like, these two kids who were, like, trying to be the heroes, and instead they both kind of, like, lost their childhoods. So I like that, where she's like, I'm gonna send you back and you can, you know, relive your life, essentially.
I do think it's a little problematic sending an adult who's going through this stuff back into a child's body, but yeah, that is definitely thematically, there's really cool stuff there. And I think
here's the thing, though. The people she's sending him back to be with are way older than him already. They just look like kids. Yeah,
true.
So it's fine.
Yeah,
it's fine.
Fair enough.
He didn't live that long as an adult anyway.
No,
you know?
But it goes back to that thing where it's like, now he goes back and, like, literally no one knows what he's done. And
it's totally the end of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Where it's like they have to go back to this simple life and they're all fucked up.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of, you know, it leads into the story of Majora's Mask pretty well, I think, which, you know, we'll get there once we get to Majora's Mask, but
you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, Zelda, I feel like, you know, to tie in pretty recently, I think over on the Champions Cast, they did like a loose ranking of some of their favorite iterations of Zelda over the actual series. And I think this sets a gold standard for Zelda games moving forward, because Zelda really is, you know, one of the crucial pillars of the plot of this game. A lot of stuff revolves around her. She's really the one that sends you out on your quest to go get the medallions, because she's the one that takes action. She's like, we gotta do something about Ganondorf. And then instead of just initially the player might think that she kind of just disappears or is in hiding, but then, you know, you're going through the whole game and Sheik is helping you, teaching you the songs, giving that poetic spin, making you think about this journey that you're going on. And then at the end, you get the sweet reveal that Sheik is Zelda. And it's like, whoa, she's been doing all this stuff all along. And it's like, it's just really cool to see this character be so involved in, you know, influencing how the game goes down.
Yeah, I like how it's not like a total given, that you all have the Triforce and stuff like that. Like I kind of like just have that in my mind, but it is kind of a big reveal when she reveals herself, and it's like, yeah, Ganon couldn't conquer everything. It actually like makes a lot of things like fall into place really well with like he lost the Triforce, and so now he's just been like inflicting his malice everywhere, trying to find the two people that have them, and they're us. That's kind of that's pretty cool actually. Like I think we take it for granted because it seems like since then they've kind of had to like rethink like what else can we do, like you can't just do that story again. But sometimes like I like the efficient simplicity of this sort of story.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, the ending's cool. I'll say I like the credits, but it I liked it better in A Link to the Past because I like that Link got to make the wish, and then we got to see like everyone hanging out.
Yeah.
Whereas this one, everyone's hanging out.
This
but
one,
everyone's
just having a party at Lon Lon Ranch.
It feels a little bit less like why are the Kokiri there?
Yeah.
Like, can they?
Wait a minute,
there?
I thought they couldn't. Yeah.
It was just like, let's take all the assets and throw them in like the biggest area.
It's we
have.
It does feel like that a little bit. It's definitely still fun. I love that it's got the Lost Woods Sorry Song remix going on.
Yeah,
it's very
it's
fun.
got like different people. I like the setup to it too, actually, where it's like they're showing all the serene places empty. There's no one there, and then it's like they're all at Lon Lon Ranch, having a party. It's fun.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking it. And then you kind of get the sages like floating by, and like they kind of have to move on from this sort of life, I guess. That's pretty cool.
Yep.
Yeah, good. It's a good ending, and Link was sent back and whatever, but like, it's not gonna stop him. I love that ending where he ventures and meets up with Zelda. That's cool, and Navi flies away. That's like a sad little moment.
For some reason, I always had it in my head that she has a line of dialogue where she says bye, and that's not true. She doesn't say anything, so I don't know where that came from.
We don't know why she leaves. I guess Link, he's become a real man, a real Highland. Navi's not needed, so she's gonna go live her life.
Yeah.
There's no Deku Tree. She can do whatever she wants.
What is the life of a fairy after something like that? She gonna go sit in a jar and wait to heal someone?
Yeah, she just becomes like a normal fairy.
Yeah,
that's bogus.
That's funny.
Not a companion. All right, well, we might as well rank this thing. What did you think about Ganon's castle?
So it didn't really live up, like I was saying before, the final dungeon bias goes both ways, and I feel like this is one that for me didn't really do it. I just think that it wasn't really a test of everything that you've learned in the game. I felt like the choice of trying to do different sections based on the dungeons that you've done in the game, it felt a little forced rather than genuinely testing you, because the content within those rooms, for me at least, is pretty lackluster. There aren't really many memorable puzzles, I feel like, in that whole section. What really saves it for me is the cinematic and atmospheric nature of this dungeon, and especially the second section where you're ascending the stairs and fighting enemies, and then of course the boss is great, the final boss is great, the escape sequence is really cool. As a dungeon, I still think it's good. I think it's in the lower half of Ocarina of Time's dungeons, but I do have Ocarina of Time's dungeons relatively high, so I ended up putting it at the 17 spot, right in between Misery Mire and Swamp Palace.
Yeah, that feels low to me for sure.
It just didn't.
Just thinking about it compared to the rest of Ocarina.
Well, I don't know. It just goes back to that. I feel like there just wasn't really enough substance in this dungeon, and especially every time I'm playing that lower section, I'm just kind of like, all right, let's go to the next room. Let's do these.
Okay.
All right, come on, let's go to the next room. There's
the puzzles have lost their luster.
yeah,
Okay. That's fair. I mean, I going back to what I said, I ranked it high because of more the roller coaster ride element of it, where yeah, it's not the most challenging. I think it has, again, like some of the worst puzzles I've ever seen in Zelda. Not overall, but they exist there, and like they're very memorably bad to me. But it it just gets massive points for being so iconic and memorable, but not enough to like really cement it at the top. If you look at the top of my list, other than the water temple, you see like the next three are like the final dungeons of that game,
yeah,
of A Link's Awakening and A Link to the Past, and that to me shows that they they petered off, or not petered off, they completed with like some memorable, challenging, tough dungeons. This is memorable, not so challenging, so I actually have it at number 9, just above Spirit Temple, because I kind of feel similarly about Spirit Temple, where it's got some great puzzles. Actually, it doesn't have any like awful ones, but to me, it's like more thematic than it is challenging. It's really just two mini dungeons smushed together, I feel like.
yeah.
But Ganon's Castle has that sort of like epicness and like, you know, theme park kind of feeling, like whoa, what an experience, more so than Spirit Temple. So I put it above there. But then going above that are like some of the dungeons that from a design standpoint, I think really are like some of the top tier, like creative, out of the box dungeons. So I put it over some personal favorites of mine, like Key Cavern, Palace of Darkness, Swamp Palace, Angler's Tunnel, that have some cool puzzles and navigation but I couldn't crack like the ones that I was like, wow, these are really, really, really out of the box.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, and that's kind of like I can probably chunk my list into something like that too, where like I would say my top 10, those are dungeons where I look at them and say, this is a blast to play. They very clearly have some sort of direction that they're going for, and I think they nail it very well. It's constantly fun every time I play it. That's my top 10. Then I would say the section of like 11 to maybe like 22, 23, it's like they were going for something here, but something pulls it back for me. Something makes it not quite hit the mark. And then I would say everything below that is it's one of three things. It either is lacking in direction, or it's overly simplistic, or something like that.
Okay.
So that for me, Ganon's Castle kind of falls right in that second section where it's like, it's the final dungeon. The atmosphere is really cool. The ascent up the tower is really cool. But I just feel like as a final dungeon, and even as a dungeon in general, I feel like it kind of misses the mark.
Okay, I can see that. Yeah, I'm even a bit more favorable going. Like top 10 for me is like some all-time classics right now, and then I think 10 to 20 is like these are solid. These are like cool dungeons that I like. And then going below that is ones where it's like these are maybe kind of uneven or something like that.
Well, definitely my second chunk, I still think they're solid. Like I still think Ganon's Castle is a cool dungeon, mainly because of that second part. That second part is what really saves it for me. That's what I really enjoy playing through that portion. I just think I think as we keep going throughout this series, that top 10, it's probably going to be, some of them are going to be pushed out. Some of them are definitely going to be staying there maybe the entire time. Like my top 5 are pretty good. I don't know how many are going to be pushing those out, but it definitely still, this whole list, I think, is going to be filled out and fleshed out a lot more as we keep going.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think, I said this going into Ocarina, and it sort of held true, but I think even more so, like, we're really going to, I think for me, we're going to see things slotting in more and not cracking the top as much And yeah, that's what makes it even more. It makes things, I think, even more challenging and stuff to like now with 5 games in, or really 3 that are at the top kind of mixed in, like really now trying to slot things in, especially trying to compare different things, like this grand Super Nintendo adventure to this more small handheld Game Boy adventure to this fully 3D N64 game. It's really fun to sometimes it's just impossible, but it's fun to like try and make a decision.
Yeah, it's just getting more difficult.
Oh, and then we have these sort of little last bits of stats where, so we calculated and we rounded our, this is not a perfect science, but our average dungeon ranking for each game, and we took out the mini dungeons. And if you want to check us on it, it's fine. But I think these are good representations maybe for, I don't know. Do you think this reflects how you feel about the game overall? Your average dungeon ranking for Ocarina, or for all the games?
No.
Okay.
Because I personally like A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening better than Ocarina of Time. But Ocarina of Time, at least dungeon, you know what it is. It's because we took out those dang mini dungeons, because I have those really, really far towards the bottom. So if we did put those in, I think it might even be below those two. But at least for,
well, if you wanted to, I just felt like it wasn't totally fair.
Well, no, you're right, because it's at least full dungeon wise, I think Ocarina of Time, and this is something that I believe. I think Ocarina of Time is, at least in the games we've covered so far, it's probably the most consistent in delivering an interesting and fun experience with the dungeon out of the games we've covered so far.
Okay. I felt like I actually have Link's Awakening at the top, and I feel like there's less dungeons, so I feel like at least I believe there are less dungeons, depending on who you talk to, but like I think it has to cut to the chase a little bit more, and I always like those kind of, I think I just kind of prefer those like styles of dungeons. So I think it's kind of like the most consistent with like the progressing the sort of challenge that it's bringing to the table. So I have that at the top, but I think A Link to the Past is also very consistent, but I might, with the dungeons at least, like that more, because I think there is so much more going on. There's like an intro dungeon, and then there's like the Hyrule Castle in the middle of the game, and then like all these dungeons after, like sort of non-linearity. So I kind of like its scope of the dungeons and like how it progresses a little bit more. You have like the 3 intro ones that kind of build up these different challenges that they're going to like extrapolate into the later game.
Yeah.
So I could rank that high, and then right behind it, it seems like Ocarina of Time is like, oh, this doesn't look good, but it's, for one, the difference between 13 and 16 is not big, but then this is right behind A Link to the Past.
1 point more.
But I think Ocarina of Time, I think it kind of reflects it to me, whereas I do feel like it's a little bit more uneven. Like I have Water Temple, it's my number 1 dungeon, but it's like, the midpoint of the adult dungeons, and then I feel like it peters off a little bit from there.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like the other ones kind of have a better job of like growing and expanding upon each other. Like they get bigger and more complex.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then the NES games we have at the bottom, they're solid for their time, but we really saw that sort of dungeon formula perfected.
Yeah.
In the
definitely important stepping stones on the way to the greatest dungeons of all time.
Yeah, and so I, overall, so far at the series, I wanted to start, we started with the NES ones, and I wanted to kind of give them their due, like you said, and then now I think what I've sort of been trying to show with these, because so many times when this subject has been approached, I think people's first immediate, like, gut reaction is, well, I can't even compare the 2D games to the 3D games because it's not fair to the 2D games. The 3D is inherently better. And that baffles me whenever I hear that. Like Like it's just a different, to me it's a different presentation, you know what I mean? It'd be like, to me it'd be like saying I think side-scrolling games are inherently better than top-down games. It's like they're just two different.
Talking about two different things. Well, I
or like yeah,
like I think this list is enough to show that at least in our eyes that's not true, because there are plenty of 3D dungeons that are slotting below 2D dungeons that are doing things better than certain 3D dungeons. I don't fully share that sentiment, but I kind of I feel like that's somewhat of a misnomer. I feel like they're not people that say that. I don't think it's true that 3D dungeons are inherently better, but just because they are in 3D games, I feel like, and this is something that I said before, I just feel like as the technology gets better, in 3D games, they're able to present things better. They're able to do things with a certain presentation. They're able to add certain details or do certain things that they are not able to do, at least as succinctly in 2D games. So I feel like for me, a more accurate way to turn that phrase would be that 3D dungeons are at more of an advantage than 2D dungeons. You know,
I would sort of agree. I would say they're better at presenting certain things, and certainly, like I would even say they might be better at presenting more things than 2D games. Yeah. But I think, I don't know. I think there are things that you can get across in both mediums, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Not just in gameplay, but in like presentation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have their strengths and their weaknesses. And I think, like I said, what I think the list will be showing now is what can these dungeons do to take advantage of 3D, and we'll go back to 2D as well. Whereas, like I said, with Ocarina of Time, I think there were some things in this game that are only in it because they were in the previous Zelda games, and it's like like a boomerang or something, and it's like, okay, well, we got to have the boomerang.
Yeah.
And instead, it's like I don't think they is fully taken advantage of in the 3D game. So it's like maybe we need to rethink some of these things.
Sure. And this was the first 3D Zelda game, so it's like a lot of those translation speed bumps are there, and they're gonna have to round them off as the series goes on.
Yes, but I would say they expertly translated the Zelda experience into 3D in Ocarina of Time. It's an all-time classic. It's hard to top it, honestly. As much as, you know, some of the more negative things I've said about it, I think it's one of my favorite games of all time. I love it, and I don't know. This has been another fun series, I would say.
Yeah, great game.
We are excited, I think, for Majora's Mask.
I'm not sure.
Oh,
I do love Majora's Mask. The dungeons. We'll see when we get there. I don't think they're gonna be cracking my top 5 or anything, but
Oh, okay. I'm saying, if I'm thinking about what can be done in 3D, we're gonna see these dungeons explore that.
Yeah.
My prediction. But okay, until then, I guess this is another great season. Everyone go check out Corey's Player Power podcast on all podcasting devices. Corey, thanks for coming along again for another season.
Absolutely. Always love it.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody at Majora's Mask.